So, there we go. Just gotta plug it in and it's gonna show up. Watch. Here we go. Boom. Just like that. We're on which series right now? What's the name of our series altogether? Witness. Now I want to ask you, maybe not specifically if you've ever been called in as a witness. I have been asked to be a testimony witness to someone's character a couple times. But if you witnessed a crime and you're called in as a witness, how well do you think you would do? Because I don't think I would do very well. I don't think I have the memory for it. I swear. I watch Law and Order. I watch these shows and they go up to these witnesses and they say, describe the person. They say, oh yeah, he was definitely, this tall. He, probably weighed this. He was about this, He was wearing, this and that. I'm like, I don't know. After church, I'm like, hey, Hannah, did you see the new person? And she's like, yeah, was it the one wearing the red shirt? I'm like, I have no idea what they were wearing. You remember what people are wearing like a half hour after it happened? I'll talk to Hannah about after having a conversation, and I say, oh, Hannah, I told them about the trip. I told them about this and that. And she said, oh, really? You told them? What did they say? I'm like, I think they said words. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't remember. How many of you guys, who here says that they would make a great witness? You remember details really well. Anybody? If you got called in? Yeah, just Jim. Okay, Jim. We'll all look to you. If any crime happens in town, we call up Jim to come and watch. How many of you guys think you would make a terrible witness? Okay, good. I'm not alone. Well, we're talking about being witnesses, and maybe we will never be called in to witness a serious crime or to testify as witnesses of a serious crime. But we are all called to be witnesses of what God has done in our lives. And we're all going to experience an opportunity to share the story of what did Jesus do in my life. So, I'm curious how I want to do this, but I think I want to make it a little interactive. For a second here, if you have a testimony, like, do you have the story of how you became a Christian or what Jesus has done in your life? Has anyone ever, boiled down their story to maybe just one sentence? Like, this is what God's done in my life. Can anyone maybe attempt to give, it doesn't need to be, in one sentence, it's going to be pretty vague. It's going to be pretty general. We're not going to always fully appreciate the whole thing. But does anyone think they could say a little bit? Like, this is who I was before, this is who I was after. You think you can fire away? Yeah.
Always had God in my life. Child, prayers, sayings on the wall. God and love of God was always vague, a nebulous person or entity. And recently, very recently, with the birth of Ivy, I have come to understand, to put a name to what I've been struggling to define. It's unconditional love.
Unconditional love. Yeah. That's awesome. Let's give it to Jim. That's great. Thank you. That's awesome. You hear that, Ivy? You're changing lives already. That's really cool. Really cool. So, always grown up. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, always grown up with an awareness of God, but even recently becoming more clear, more experiencing that love and being able to articulate that love. This is an unconditional love. I love that. It's awesome. We'll be thinking about it. At the end of the sermon, I'll give you guys one more opportunity if anyone else, something comes up that you'd want to share. So we're going to talk about a man who had a testimony. He had a story to say, and he has to say it again and again. It's a really interesting story because the miracle happens. Throughout the Gospels, we get these stories of miracles happening, but then we move on to the next and the next and the next. Here we get the miracle really early in the story, and then it goes on for 30 plus verses with this whole aftermath of the miracle. And this man is put through his own trials. So I'm going to tell this story. I was torn. Do I read it all? It's a lot to read, so I'm going to do my best to retell this story and highlight some of the things that come to mind. But you can pull out your Bibles if you want to kind of follow along with me. You might be able to catch some details I might miss. But it's John 9. It's the whole chapter of John 9. And it's one of these that you read it once and you're like, okay, I kind of get it. But I'm a little confused about why this was said or why this, or it feels kind of repetitive. And so if you read it again and again and again, it's like all these things come alive. And it's like these colors come out. And you realize that there were puzzles kind of sprinkled throughout the story. And it's so interesting and fascinating to me, some of the puzzles within the story of John 9. And some of the connections that are made. That you hear like Jesus say some things and you're like, well, why did you say it like that? And then you're like, oh, it comes back. So the story of John 9 is a story where Jesus sees a man born blind. He heals the man. And then people have questions. So the neighbors, the people who saw him when he was blind, all his life begging, sinning and begging, They were wondering if that was him. They're asking him questions, what happened? Eventually, they bring in the religious leaders, the Pharisees. They've got questions. They are suspicious of Jesus, so they're questioning the man because they really want to nail Jesus for making some mistakes and really doing work on the Sabbath. They want to finally catch Jesus in a sin. And so the man just says, I think he's a prophet. So then they go to his parents. They say, is this really what happened? When the parents say, yeah, that's my son, they go back to the man. They question him some more. And then the man gets more and more bold toward the Pharisees. Eventually, the conversation with the Pharisees ends, and he finds Jesus again. And I'll leave it at that, okay, for now, just to get an overview of it. So it's a miracle with a lot of questions. A lot of questions. And throughout the story, there's this irony of what does it mean to be blind, and what does it mean to see? Or what does it mean to be in the dark, and what does it mean to be in the light? So what happens? They are walking along, Jesus and his disciples, as they do. They see a man born blind, and the disciples ask a very innocent question. They say, was it the man who sinned or his parents? Who sinned to make the man blind? And I think, when Ivy's a little older, when Ivy's able to talk, I feel like that's the thing that you ask when you're 3, 4, or 5, maybe like 6 or 7 years old, maybe 10, 11. But once you get to be adults, you don't ask those questions in public. But they must have been so comfortable with Jesus to be able to say, well, who sinned? But I'm like, I don't know. If it were me, I'd be like, shut up. You don't do that. You don't say that. Hannah taught me a lot of that. Sometimes I would ask some questions or say some things and you're like, you don't ask that question. And I feel like that's one of those questions. You don't ask, who sinned? But they asked. And Jesus didn't say quiet, no questions. For Jesus, any question was on the table. And so Jesus answered the question and said, it wasn't because anyone sinned, but that the works of God would be shown. Okay? So why is the man blind? It's the first sort of play on words. Why is he blind? He's blind so that we would see the miracle and the glory of God. And then he talks about day and night, and he says, night is coming, which I think means we're all going to die one day. So while we're alive, while the day's here, take that as an opportunity to do the work of God. He says, I've got to do God's work. And then he just throws in this line. He says, by the way, I am the light of the world. I am the light of the world. Okay? So why does he say that? I am the light of the world. Well, he's talking about while there's day, we should be working. While we have the chance to work, we should take it. But he's also talking about light as in the man is now going to be able to see. And he says, I am the light. And anytime Jesus says, I'm the light of the world, or really anytime we see light in the Bible, we need to be thinking of day one, creation. And God speaking out in the midst of chaos and ruin, saying, let there be light. Jesus says, I am that light. I am the new creation breaking in. There's a lot to what Jesus is saying. When we see light, it speaks to the new creation. It also speaks to wisdom, understanding. It's the same idea when we say like light bulb moment, we have some understanding. When we talk about light in the Bible, it's talking about understanding, wisdom. There's even a play on words in the Hebrew. The word for instruction is Torah. The word for light is or. So even similar words. So light means understanding. It can be this new creation, and both those things, understanding and being transformed and being made new, is what this man is going to experience. So what does Jesus do? He goes up to the man, which is really fascinating. He doesn't ask for permission. He doesn't start small talk like you might imagine. He doesn't say, hi, how are you? My name is Jesus. He just goes up, he spits on the ground. You guys know this story? He spits on the ground, makes mud, he works it, and then he shoves it into the man's face. He says, go clean up. I love that. Like, if you're begging, you're asking for money, and he's blind people. Like, he may not have seen this coming. And all of a sudden, there's mud in his face. He says, go to the pool of Siloam and clean up. And so the pool of Siloam, what is this pool of Siloam all about? You know when there's a pool identified by name that there's something of significance. So what is this pool? This pool of Siloam was built by King Hezekiah. It was during one of the invasions, I think of Babylon invading, and there was a siege. So the army was surrounded, and so there's no way of getting water into the city of Jerusalem. And so they're in trouble. And so Hezekiah brilliantly puts together this incredible engineering feat. They build this pool that's the size of 2 Olympic swimming pools. Huge, huge. Very impressive for that day. And that was able to gather water from a stream so that they would have water. Pretty incredible. So there's this pool associated with this king. And then later, years go by, and it becomes the site of ritual cleansing. And so you would clean up there and purify yourself ceremonially. And the thought was, because it comes from a spring, it's considered living water that can cleanse you. Kind of cool. So here the man is being ceremonially cleansed. As the mud is being cleaned off his face, he's being cleansed. So it's not just about a physical miracle happening, but there's something spiritual happening in his life. Of course, when we think of mud, we should think about Genesis too. Genesis as well. When we think of mud, we should be thinking about God reaching in and forming Adam out of the ground, from the ground. And when the stream comes, he's making mud. We've talked about that mud plus the breath of God equals humanity. And so when Jesus is taking the mud, putting it in his face, it's not just, a messy art project or someone is not just playing with Play-Doh, but what Jesus is doing is he's signifying he is God. Just like God can create man out of mud, Jesus can recreate man out of mud. And he sends him to the pool of Siloam, which John tells us the name means sent. Which is interesting. I don't know who's being sent here. The pool of Siloam. Is it Jesus? Jesus talks about being sent by the Father. But this time it's the man who's been sent to the pool. So much going on. It's just this little miracle. So much happening. So he goes to the pool, cleans up, and he can see. And he's happy. Immediately this guy is being questioned. Then we turn the scene from the miracle and Jesus. We don't see Jesus for a bit. Then we go to his neighbors and people who have witnessed him begging on the streets, sitting there begging. They say, wait a minute, who's this guy? And then they argue. They say, well, no. This is just someone who looks like the man born blind. But then he speaks up himself. He said, no, it's me. I'm the guy. And they say, well, what happened to you? And he says, the man they call Jesus, okay? The man they call Jesus got some mud, put it in my face, told me to wash up, and then I could see. He told his story. He told his testimony, right? This is the first time he's asked to tell his story. The man they call Jesus, not very close. Doesn't sound like a friend he's had for a long time. The man they call Jesus. He's like, I just met this guy. I don't know. And he got his sight after Jesus went away. So he's like, I couldn't even tell you what he looks like. The man they call Jesus. Lots of distance so far. Notice how this is going to change though. So the neighbors start asking, they're like, well, do you know where he is? And he says, I don't know. Which, if you're reading a story, if you're reading any old fictional book and someone says, I don't know, you may not think much of it, but you know that in the New Testament, every detail matters. And it's kind of peculiar that a question is going to get asked that somebody doesn't know the answer to. Why is that included in this story? Well, we'll see. But it doesn't play with this whole blindness and the having wisdom, the light, and everything. So he says, I don't know. I don't know where he is. Which is true. He's like, guys, I don't even know what he looks like. Of course I don't know where he is. So the neighbors start thinking, they're like, wait a minute. Today is the Sabbath, and this miracle happened. We better tell the Pharisees. So these are the religious leaders. They're kind of like the pastors, but they hold a lot of sway. Because they're not just the pastors, they're like the mayors. They're not just the mayors, but they're kind of like in charge of all the industry. The Pharisees have a lot of power. The Pharisees have so much power that if you get kicked out of the synagogue, which they have the right to do, then you are cut from society. You might be cut off from your family. You won't, you don't have that stamp of approval to do business with. And so you want to stay on their good side. And the neighbors go up to the Pharisees and let the Pharisees know what's happening. And the Pharisees go up to the man. We don't know this man's name. We just call him the man. They go up to the man. They say, well, what happened? And he say, well, this guy comes up to me. He gets mud. He puts it in my face, doesn't wash up, and then I can see. And then they're split. They're like, wait a minute. That sounds like work. And we know that's against the rules to work on the Sabbath. That's one of the 10 Commandments. You don't do work on the Sabbath. And they made it clear this is the kind of work you can't do. They, as the religious leaders, defined what that work was. You don't see that in the Bible, this is the work you can't do. But they decided this is the work you can't do. And so they were very disturbed by it. But then some other Pharisees say, well, hold up. He did a miracle. Does that mean he's from God? God might be, with this guy if he was able to do something this cool. And so John tells us that the Pharisees were divided over it. Some said, for sure he's a sinner. Others say, well, hold up. he did a miracle. So then they go to the man, and they ask the man, what do you think? And now the man says, I think he's a prophet. So this idea of being a prophet means he's from God. I think he came from God. So already we're starting to see some change, some evolution in the man born blind. I mean, obviously a big change, he's no longer blind, but he starts off saying the man they call Jesus. Now he's saying what he thinks is Jesus is a good guy. He says, I think he's a prophet. And so now they want to discredit this man. So you know what they do is they go up to mom and dad. The Pharisees say, okay, let's get some information. Let's get some other witnesses to who this guy is, some character witnesses. So they have 3 questions for parents. Which is interesting because this isn't the first time we're hearing about the parents. You remember the first time we heard about the parents was when? Was the disciples' first question was who sinned? So now this whole story is coming back to that first question. Who sinned? This story isn't just about a miracle, it's about who has the information and who's the sinner here. What do we think of different people? So they go up to parents with 3 questions. The first question is this your son? The second question is, was he born blind? And the third question is really important, is how did he get his sight? So the parents answer the first question, yes, he's my son. The second question they answer, yes, he was born blind. The third question they say, I don't know. I don't know. And John tells us they didn't say, I don't know, because they didn't know. They say, I don't know, because they were afraid if they did say what happened, that the Pharisees were going to kick him out of the synagogue, and they were really scared of being kicked out of the synagogue, and so that's why they say, I don't know. He's old enough, you can ask him. So the Pharisees do just that. They summon the man back up into their quarters. So this guy, man, he went from being a beggar on the street, nobody notices him, to now the most powerful people in town just can't get enough of this guy. He's getting all this attention. And they say, glorify God. I think I have it. A second time they summon the man who had been blind. Give glory to God by telling the truth. They're really concerned with the truth. We know. This is the first time we see that somebody knows something. So far, we've got the man didn't know where Jesus was. The parents didn't know what happened. But the Pharisees, they're the people who know. You know, if you're a Pharisee, that means you have the answers. That means you know some stuff. And what they know is that this man, which man? Jesus. It's a little confusing because we've been calling the man born blind. We don't have his name, so we keep calling him man, the man. But now they're referring to Jesus. They say, we know this man is a sinner. But we know from the story that they don't know. They're divided over it. But apparently the people who were anti-Jesus won out in the debates. They say, we know he's a sinner. Tell us the truth. And so he backs up a little bit. He takes a little step back. He's like, he doesn't defend Jesus here. He says, I don't know. Sinner or not, I don't know. Yet again, I don't know. But one thing I do know, I was blind. Now I see. You know, we can get into lots of debates with people over the origins of the world. We can get lots of debates over the historicity of the resurrection. But people tend not to debate you when you say, this is what happened in my life. That's the power of a testimony. It cuts through. And it gives you freedom. You know, the last 2 weeks we've been talking about the gospel message, and I've been trying to confuse you a little bit and trying to tell you, like, some of the things that we're really familiar with. There's so much more to it, and it can get kind of complicated. But you know what shouldn't get complicated is your testimony. To be able to say, this is what happened to me. And you can say it again and again. And you say, maybe I don't know everything about Jesus. I don't know what the incarnation exactly entails. I don't know if I can explain the Trinity in depth with precise language, or I don't know if I can get into the deepest parts of theology. But one thing I can tell you is that my life has been changed by Jesus. I once was blind, now I see. I love this line. The man says, I don't know if he's a sinner or not. I know what I used to be. I used to be blind. So between this, they say, so what happened to you? They ask him again, how did you get your sight? And he replies, I've told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? Now he's being real cute right here. Do you hear the sarcasm? Do you? He said, okay, so most of you will not appreciate this, but I'm going to say it anyways. There's a new song out from last year by Taylor Swift. And the song is Actually Romantic. Hannah is a big Taylor Swift fan, so of course I have to be a Taylor Swift fan. It's called Actually Romantic, and it's a song written to one of her worst critics. And it's saying, wow, you are writing all these letters and emails to me. My goodness, you're obsessed with me. You treat me better than some of my ex-boyfriends treated me. Wow, this is really romantic. This is what they got. This is the same energy. This guy says, you're really obsessed with this Jesus guy. You must run and be his disciple too. Not a way to make friends with the Pharisees by doing that. What do you notice here though? So he went from, just think about the progression of this man now. He goes from this guy they call Jesus, and now he says, do you want to be his disciple too? What's happened between those 2 points? Did he even see Jesus? Did he even really meet Jesus? Does he have very much experience? No experience with Jesus. What's happened? He's told his story twice. And it's like every time he tells a story, his faith gets stronger. Every time he tells a story of what Jesus has done, he's like, I want to follow Jesus. So now we find out that this guy is a disciple of Jesus. So the Pharisees get mad. They don't like this. The whole, you want to be his disciples too. They get real mad. They say, what are you talking about? They say, you're one of his disciples? They say, we're not disciples of him. No, we're disciples of Moses. And we follow Moses. And we know God spoke to Moses. Moses was a prophet. You said Jesus was a prophet. Moses, we know, was a prophet sent from God. And then the Pharisees say this line. They say, we do not know. We do not know where this man is from. And the man jumps on it. He says, in the Greek, it's this is marvelous. This is incredible. A lot of versions use a different word, but this is really interesting, the man says. That you don't know something. I thought you guys knew everything. But apparently there's something you don't know. You say you don't know where he's from. Interesting. And yet he gave sight to me. And yet, by all indications, this guy is from God. By all indications, this guy is someone that God will listen to. By all indications, this is a prophet. And yet, you don't know. Even I know who this guy is. You don't know. who he is. Isn't that interesting? The boldness. The boldness. See, when Jesus put mud on his face, when Jesus gave sight to the man, he didn't just change him physically. There is something that happened. And as he's telling his story, there's something going on in this man's life where he is willing to be as bold as anyone can be, to stand up to the authorities, the people who have the right to do all kinds of horrible things to him. And yet he's willing to call them out on their hypocrisy. He's willing to call them out on them who say that they care about truth, being willing to disregard evidence, to hide the truth. He says, isn't that interesting? And then they get furious. They yell out insults at the man, and it says they kick him out of the synagogue, what his parents were afraid of. So he's kicked out. He's lost everything. He's gained everything. He's gained his sight. He's gained this newfound confidence and boldness. But he lost everything. When you're kicked out of the synagogue, it's over for you. And yet, the story doesn't end there. Jesus goes. He hears about it, and he finds the man. He asks a random question. He says, do you believe in the Son of Man? Not like, heard you got kicked out of the synagogue. Tough break for you, man. He just, do you believe in the Son of Man? Jesus loved to call himself Son of Man. And whenever he refers to himself as Son of Man, he's referring to Daniel 7, most likely. And it's this image of a man rising up over these monsters and beasts and defeating these enemies and rising up and sitting at the right hand of the Ancient of Days. Is this human being elevated to a divine seat. He says, do you believe in the Son of Man? And the man tells him, sure, whatever. Tell me about the guy and I'll believe in him. This guy is sold out for Jesus. Every time he's thinking about what Jesus did for him, he's like, yes, I want to follow Jesus. I listen to Jesus. I'm in for it, Jesus. I'm willing to sacrifice everything to you, Jesus. He says, you want me to believe in the Son of Man? I'll believe in the Son of Man. Where is he? And Jesus says, you're looking at him. You catch just how fun, you know he had a twinkle in his eye when he talks to this man born blind, and he says it that way. You're looking at him. The man says, I believe, and he bows down and he worships Jesus. Imagine that. He worshipped Jesus. This man knew that he was in the presence of God. This was more than a prophet. This is more than someone sent by God. Because you do not bow down and worship a king. You do not bow down and worship an angel. You do not bow down and worship a prophet. You bow down and you worship God himself. And the formerly blind man goes from the man they call Jesus to now he's come full circle. He is bowing down and worshiping Jesus. Then Jesus says another line. He says, this is why I came. I've come to bring judgment so that the blind will see and those who see will be blind. And the Pharisees hear him. Apparently the Pharisees were listening in on this whole thing. They say, what, are you calling us blind? And Jesus says this. He says, if you were blind, you'd get a pass. But because you claim to see, you claim to know everything, the guilt remains with you. See, this took me several readings to catch this. Do you see what Jesus did? Do you remember what was the very first question the disciples asked Jesus? They said, who did what? Who sinned? This is a who's done it. This is a Sherlock Holmes. Who's the murderer here? Who's the sinner in the story? And we're looking out and we're like, is it the parents? Is it the man born blind? Is it Jesus? Who's the sinner? And the story ends with Jesus saying, he's the Sherlock character. And he says, it's you, Pharisees. You are the blind guides. You are the ones who are willing to lie and willing to abuse your power. And I've come to bring life to those who are suffering but to expose the abuse of power to those who are hurting people. So a couple things I want to say. Following Jesus gives you everything. The blind man got his sight. He got everything. His whole life transformed. Following Jesus costs you everything. He was kicked out of the synagogue for standing up for Jesus. Jesus draws out, he brings out the best in us. The man born blind didn't just get eyesight. His character was transformed. The best part of him was changed. He was given courage and confidence and awareness of the truth. And he was willing to stand up to the bullies. But Jesus also exposes the worst in us. The Pharisee side of us, Jesus exposes. The hypocritical side of us. The side of us that says, I'm going to get my way, and I'm going to protect what's mine. And I'm going to judge other people. And I'm going to disregard information if that'll help me get ahead a little more. Or if I'm convinced that someone's a bad guy, I'm going to try to convince everyone else, and I'm not going to see the best in them. All these, the worst is being exposed in these Pharisees. Your testimony. So what was his testimony? I was blind, then I saw. It includes a past transformation and a present participation. See, a part of this man's testimony wasn't just, I was blind, then I saw, I was blind, then I saw. It was also, he bowed down and worshipped Jesus. So in our testimony, it's not just enough to say, God did something in the past. That's kind of what Jim said. It's like, this is what I'm learning now. This is what my relationship with God is like now. And this is where he's taking me now. I worship Jesus now. Because I have a moment I can look back on. And so I've learned over time. So if you were scared that I was going to ask you to share, you are in luck. This weekend. This week. Let's pray.